One night after people in Belfast gathered for a vigil to honor 10-year-old Marissa Kennedy.
What helped me cope tonight was the candles, the ribbons, the poems.
Marissa Kennedy, just 10 years old, walked to school with her backpack bouncing on her shoulder, humming the songs she loved. Her neighborhood was quiet, familiar, a place where children should feel safe and families at ease. But behind the smiles, dozens of warnings had already been raised. Teachers, neighbors, and doctors all noticing signs that something was wrong. Each report quietly closed, leaving a system that had the chance to protect her, but didn't act in time. What was meant to be ordinary days of laughter and learning were shadowed by missed opportunities and unanswered calls. This is the story of Marissa Kennedy, a story that deserves to be heard, so that her life and the lessons it carries are never forgotten. Marissa A. Kennedy entered the world on October 29, 2007 in Middletown, New York. Her mother, Sharon Kennedy, was only 22 at the time and chose to raise her without sharing details about Marissa's biological father. When Marissa was 8, her family grew when Sharon married Julio Carrillo in 2015, who became her stepfather. As the oldest child, Marissa later welcomed 3 younger siblings into her life, 2 brothers and a sister. Much of her early care and guidance also came from her grandparents, Joseph and Roseanne Kennedy, who played a central role in her upbringing. To them, Marissa was cherished beyond measure, a child they described as the center of their hearts and their greatest joy. With her light hair, bright blue eyes, and an unmistakable grin, Marissa had a way of bringing warmth wherever she went. Those closest to her often said her presence filled a room with energy and light. She found comfort and excitement in books, especially trips to the library where stories became a world she loved to explore. As a child, she gravitated toward the Magic Tree House series, later becoming absorbed in imaginative tales like Harry Potter. Purple was her favorite color, and she delighted in activities that let her move and create, swimming, dancing, and building elaborate Lego sets with remarkable focus and skill. Trips to the aquarium fascinated her, as did movies she watched again and again, with Frozen holding a special place in her heart. She also had an unexpected curiosity for cars, eagerly wandering through car shows, peering beneath hoods to study engines up close. Marissa connected easily with others, forming friendships wherever she went, and she deeply valued the people who made up her world, her family, her friends, and those who loved her most. Marissa spent her earliest years in a shared household with her mother, Sharon, and Sharon's parents, Joseph and his wife, Roseanne. Roseanne had been part of Sharon's life since Sharon was a toddler, and she remembered a childhood shaped by quiet challenges. Sharon spoke later than most children and struggled in traditional classrooms. Although she began kindergarten like her peers, it quickly became clear that the setting was overwhelming. Her parents moved her into a specialized school where she received year-round instruction in small, supportive groups. In that environment, Sharon found steadier footing. She completed high school with a modified diploma and did her best to step into adulthood, though everyday problem-solving remained difficult for her. As a young adult, Sharon tried to work and build independence. She held positions at a medical office and later at a childcare center, but both roles proved hard to sustain. She followed directions exactly as given, yet became lost when routines changed. Eventually, those jobs ended. When Sharon became pregnant, she kept the news from her parents for as long as she could. When they learned the truth, their reaction came from worry rather than anger. They questioned whether Sharon could manage the responsibilities of caring for a baby and arranged in-home guidance to teach her the basics of infant care. After Marissa was born, the family remained together in New Windsor, with Joseph and Roseanne offering daily help. Sharon later found work at Walmart and took pride in it, even though she was often criticized for working slowly. Each time her job was at risk, Roseanne stepped in to explain Sharon's learning challenges, hoping to protect the stability Sharon had found. It was at Walmart that Sharon met Julio. Their relationship began quietly, kept from her family at first. When Sharon's parents eventually learned about him, they were uneasy. Julio was significantly older and Sharon had never lived on her own. Still, when they met him, he came across as relaxed and reassuring. He spoke easily, seemed attentive, and always had a response that smoothed concerns. Joseph and Roseanne allowed themselves to hope that Julio might provide Sharon with the guidance and support she had always needed, believing he could help care for her in ways they had tried to do for so many years. But before we begin, I just want to say thank you to my amazing viewers and subscribers. Your support through likes, shares, and comments means the world to me. Your engagement helps make these stories even more meaningful. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts.
Doctors believed Sharon would benefit from a higher level of professional care, but no placement was available at the time. During these appointments, providers observed that Julio closely managed conversations, often remaining present and guiding what was shared. When an OCFS caseworker visited the home on December 9th, Julio described Sharon's personal challenges as the source of the household's struggles. Sharon told the caseworker she had plans in place to seek support and follow recommended care. Marissa, when asked, said she felt okay and believed she could talk to her parents if something troubled her. Still, a concerning pattern was taking shape. During official visits, Sharon and Julio consistently offered reassurances, signed forms, and spoke of future changes. Promises were made, yet little seemed to change afterward. OCFS contacted child welfare officials in New York to check for past involvement, but there was no record of prior reports. When Joseph and Roseanne had been close by, no agency had ever needed to step in, underscoring how much Marissa's safety and stability had once relied on the watchful presence of her grandparents. Later in December, the family sat down with a provider to talk about counseling options. Throughout the meeting, Julio led most of the conversation. The clinician noted concern that he was hesitant about Marissa meeting one-on-one, though Marissa herself said she didn't want sessions at that time. Sharon expressed dissatisfaction with the practice and said she planned to move her care elsewhere, ending their connection with that office. Whether Marissa's words were influenced or not remains unclear, but a familiar cycle appeared to repeat. When oversight felt close, the family would change providers, resetting the process and delaying follow-up while new assurances were made. The very next day, Sharon told the caseworker they had identified a new provider and intended to arrange family counseling. On December 19th, Sharon and Julio met with school staff and agreed to steps meant to improve Marissa's attendance. Even so, school personnel later shared that the commitment didn't feel sincere. They sensed an effort to appear cooperative rather than address the underlying issues. As the new year began, several scheduled appointments were already missed, including one related to ongoing care. On January 10th, a public health nurse visited the apartment. These visits are designed to support families at home and help monitor overall well-being. During the visit, Sharon and Julio were receptive and spoke positively about receiving assistance. The nurse did not document immediate safety concerns. 2 days later, with no new information suggesting risk, OCFS closed the case. In early 2017, Sharon welcomed another baby girl. On April 3rd, Marissa met with a new provider for an intake appointment. Because of repeated changes in care, she had gone several months without consistent support. At that visit, Julio again did most of the talking, describing challenges within the family. The provider excused Marissa from school for that morning, with the expectation she would return later that day. When the school noticed she was absent the entire day, and again the following day, they reached out. Julio offered differing explanations to the school, the provider, and later to officers who conducted a welfare check. Those inconsistencies raised concern, prompting the provider to notify OCFS. Shortly after, a prevention worker was assigned, bringing renewed attention to Marissa's situation. On April 5th, a school staff member tried to speak privately with Marissa. She shared that she felt safe at home, but also quietly explained that she had been told not to speak with anyone at school. When Sharon arrived for pickup, a staff member mentioned that Marissa hoped to stay for the after-school program. Sharon said she needed to check with Julio first. Moments later, Sharon spoke briefly with Marissa, and then unexpectedly, the two hurried out of the building and into a car where Julio was waiting. The sudden departure left staff uneasy. They reported the incident to the OCFS prevention worker and again raised concerns about Marissa's ongoing absences. As April continued, concerns around the home grew. A neighbor contacted authorities after hearing raised voices coming from the apartment. Julio told officers the family had just received an eviction notice and that emotions were running high. In mid-May, a medical provider filed a report after missed appointments, raised alarms about unmet needs. Sharon and Julio said Marissa required ongoing care, but explained that they had canceled an appointment due to an emergency room visit. Records did not support that claim. Officers attempted a welfare check, but the family could not be located. Days later, police were called back for another check, after a neighbor again reported loud disturbances. When officers arrived, no one answered the door. The following day, the same neighbor reached out once more, describing continued disturbances inside the apartment. They reported signs of Sharon's distress and noted that Julio's words toward her were verbally and emotionally distressing. The repeated calls reflected a growing sense of fear and concern throughout the building. On May 24th, another neighbor contacted authorities after witnessing behavior that raised serious concern. They described Julio engaging in troubling conduct toward Marissa while speaking strictly to her in a vehicle. The neighbor said Sharon appeared distraught and shared that these moments were not isolated. According to their account, Julio's behavior left others in the building feeling uneasy, adding to a pattern of concern that continued to escalate. By May 26th, the school formally reported Marissa's continued absences. She had missed 29 days of school, with most of those occurring after a support plan had already been put in place. When that report was filed, OCFS opened a new case and reassigned it to a different worker. That same day, the caseworker attempted 2 unannounced home visits, but no one answered. Sharon later called to schedule a meeting for the following day. The plan was to speak with Marissa privately at school before meeting the family at home. Sharon called again to say Marissa had a condition that made speaking with unfamiliar adults difficult. Even so, the caseworker explained that a private conversation with Marissa was necessary, placing the child's voice, at last, at the center of the process. On June 1st, the caseworker followed the planned schedule, meeting Marissa at school and connecting with the rest of the family at their home. At school, Marissa expressed that she wasn't comfortable speaking privately. When the caseworker tried to ask more questions, she remained quiet, simply observing. School staff shared their ongoing concerns and noted that Sharon and Julio were considering transferring Marissa to a different school. Later, at the apartment, the caseworker met with Sharon and Julio alone. Sharon explained that she and Julio made family decisions together and said that Marissa had missed school because of appointments. She also said they had avoided field trips out of concern for Marissa's health. Sharon acknowledged that she sometimes raised her voice in frustration and said she intended to seek professional support for herself. Julio said that Marissa's school absences and reluctance to attend trips were partly due to appointments and partly because she didn't want to go. He described challenges in managing her behavior and admitted to raising his voice. Occasionally, a few days later, the school reported that Marissa appeared unusually tired. The school contacted her doctor, who indicated that this level of fatigue was unexpected. Concerns grew that Marissa's care might not be consistent. When the caseworker followed up, Julio said Marissa was facing ongoing challenges and claimed that her grandmother was bothering her, asserting that a court order existed, though records showed otherwise. He explained that appointments to review Marissa's care had been missed and attributed the family's eviction to the many calls from authorities, linking it to Sharon's personal challenges. On June 29th, OCFS formally closed the case, stating there were no substantiated concerns. Around mid-July, OCFS received several reports about Marissa. Her parents brought her to the ER on consecutive days, but left before any plan could be established, and communication with OCFS paused until September. In August, Sharon and Julio moved to a condo in Stockton Springs, Maine, owned by Joseph and Roseanne. The children shared a single bedroom with their parents. Joseph and Roseanne spent 10 days in Maine with Marissa, making every effort to create happy memories. They noticed she often looked to Julio before making choices. During the visit, she enjoyed mini-golf, built a Lego castle, went shopping for a new outfit, and played with a marble run, smiling and engaged with her grandparents. While these moments brought joy, it was difficult to imagine how much she would miss this support once they left in mid-August. By late October, Sharon returned from care and met with a new caseworker, Susan. She signed paperwork and appeared cooperative, discussing housing and appointments, while limiting contact between Marissa and her grandparents. Following this meeting, the family largely stopped communicating with the agency. Julio controlled access, frequently changing contact information and restricting communication with both Marissa and her extended family. On November 27th, Susan made an unannounced visit to the Stockton Springs condo. Julio claimed the family had been in a shelter, but they had actually been visiting relatives in New York. During the visit, Susan clarified a mix-up with the case manager's name because Sharon had given the wrong name during a recent ER visit. After correcting the information, Sharon signed paperwork for a new agency. Marissa spoke briefly with Susan and was expected to return to school the next day. While at the hospital, both Sharon and Julio had participated in counseling, but they stopped once Marissa returned, prompting another report to OCFS. Hospital staff noted Marissa was kind and well-behaved, contradicting the difficult behavior Julio described. In early December, Susan met the family again. Marissa had visited the ER 2 more times, and the family was switching counselors. Julio explained the situation to Susan, who accepted his account without confirming it against records. In early January 2018, while 6 months pregnant, Sharon was hospitalized due to a serious personal crisis. Her doctors reported concerns to OCFS because she had 2 very young children. Susan scheduled a meeting with the family, but Sharon and Julio repeatedly rescheduled or canceled appointments. Sharon's counselor confirmed she had only attended 2 sessions since mid-December. On January 24th, Susan finally met the family at the Stockton Springs condo. Despite agreements made months earlier, Marissa was still not enrolled in services, and the family had not participated in home and community support programs. Susan had them complete new referral forms and signed a plan for children's support services for the younger children. When the Children's Support Services team evaluated the toddlers almost 2 weeks later, they were worried that one of the kids was mimicking Sharon's behavior. They told Susan, who scheduled a meeting with the family a few days later. It raised concern about how early children reflect their surroundings. What do you think? On February 23rd, Susan met with Sharon, Julio, and Marissa in the condo's basement. The younger children were resting, while Marissa sat quietly beside her mother. Susan noticed that Marissa appeared very tired and observed faint discoloration on some areas. When Susan gently asked about them, Marissa stayed silent. Julio explained that Marissa had recently been seen for emotional support because she was overwhelmed, adding that she was quiet from fatigue. Susan accepted his account at the time, unaware of the full situation.
During the meeting, Sharon shared that 4 months after agreeing to enroll her daughter, Marissa still did not have a dedicated case manager or counseling support. Susan completed additional paperwork, discussed the findings from Children's Support Services, and explained options for extending ARP assistance. After ensuring the family understood the next steps, Susan concluded the visit, leaving the family with plans to move forward. 2 days later, on the afternoon of February 25, 2018, emergency services were contacted after Marissa was not responding to her parents calling her name. Responders arrived shortly after and located her upstairs in the family bedroom. Despite immediate response efforts, Marissa could not be saved and was later pronounced deceased. Those who examined the scene noted a number of concerning indicators related to Marissa's condition and the household environment. These indicators suggested she had been living under stress and unmet needs. Investigators documented signs that raised serious questions about the environment she had been experiencing, prompting a deeper review of what had been happening behind closed doors. Authorities spoke separately with Sharon and Julio to better understand the events leading up to that day. Sharon initially suggested Marissa's condition was the result of an accident and downplayed the seriousness of what had occurred, describing only limited corrective measures. When investigators later spoke with Julio, he repeated the account he had given during the emergency call and mentioned that he had been planning to formally bring Marissa into the family through adoption. As questioning continued, inconsistencies emerged, and Julio eventually acknowledged that Marissa had been living in a deeply unsafe and overwhelming environment for months. He claimed Sharon was also involved and said the situation had escalated gradually over time. He also told investigators that the scene inside the home had been intentionally altered to suggest an accident. According to his account, actions were taken to reposition and delay contacting emergency services, creating a false narrative about what had occurred. After investigators completed their interviews, Sharon and Julio were taken into custody the following day. The charges reflected the seriousness of what authorities believed had occurred inside the home. Sharon, who was expecting a child at the time, appeared visibly emotional during early court proceedings, while Julio remained largely detached. Neither was released, and both stayed in custody as the case moved forward. Months later, Sharon gave birth while still incarcerated, another reminder of how deeply this case affected multiple lives. In July 2019, Julio accepted responsibility in court and entered a guilty plea. He was given a lengthy 55-year prison sentence, reflecting the court's determination that there had been serious and sustained lapses in responsibility. He was transferred into the state prison system, where he continues to serve that sentence. The sentence brought a measure of accountability, though it could not undo the pain, the loss, or the difficult circumstances at the center of the case. Sharon's trial began in December 2019. Julio was called as a witness but declined to answer questions. Investigators instead relied on digital evidence recovered from several phones found in the home after the arrests. These devices were turned over to authorities and became a central part of the case. Jurors were shown a limited selection of this material, which raised serious concerns about Marissa's well-being and the environment she had been living in. The recordings offered a quiet but unsettling glimpse into daily life inside the home. Without showing explicit moments, they conveyed an atmosphere of tension and emotional strain that concerned investigators and the court. For those reviewing the evidence, it became clear that Marissa was surrounded by instability rather than reassurance, conditions that might have been recognized and addressed sooner. My take on this case. Marissa's story highlights how repeated missed appointments and inconsistent follow-ups left her needs unmet. Early warning signs were overlooked, making it harder for professionals and family to intervene. Julio and Sharon's control over communication created barriers to support. Frequent changes in doctors and counselors disrupted continuity of care. Extended family and school staff noticed concerning patterns but had limited access. This situation could have been mitigated with timely verification and consistent check-ins. Systems need to ensure children's voices are heard and acted upon quickly. Training caregivers and professionals to recognize subtle distress is essential. Subscribe to stay informed about real stories that matter and important awareness for the public.